All right. Good morning, Indy Ball Nation. I am back, and we have matters to discuss. I know what you're thinking. You're not dead. No, neither of us are that lucky, frankly. Just been not doing content for a minute, as I'm sure you noticed. I mean, I've been doing Indy Ball Report Pod. Go check that out. But for the most part, I've been kind of angling towards some potential Indy Ball jobs, and I don't like to say things publicly during that time because you never know what could cost you a job. Turns out that still cost me a job, so it doesn't really matter, does it? Because, hold on. Yeah, no, I haven't gotten a job. So, we're back. And we got things to discuss because I was going to do this just as a manager musical chairs type of update, but now we have a new Indie League apparently, so we should discuss that briefly as well. I will say in advance, Nick from Indie Ball Pod, second plug in the first minute. He has already done a video about this Canadian League, so I'm not going to say too much. Go check his video out. Maybe I'll link it at the bottom. Maybe I'll forget. Who's to say? But it'll at least be discussed in brief. Let's get to it. We're doing more of an informal thing here with these potentially new series of morning videos. Depends how much I like doing videos in the morning, if I'm honest about it. But let's recap everything you might have missed when it comes to the manager market and what could be the coaching carousel. I like manager musical chairs because in Indie Ball there's so much of the trading of jobs when it comes to, wow, that sounds not good, keep it in though. When it comes to who's going to be managing what team, it is a little bit more like musical chairs. So let's check out what we've got here. We'll start with the simpler leagues as it goes. We'll start in the American Association, though not with the simplest job here because early rumors from Cleburne were Pete Incaviglia was out. It seems like it was not a happy situation. Things were a bit of a mess. And Pete Incaviglia is coming back from what it seems. So no change there, I guess. Then when it comes to Kane County, George Samus, he signed through 2028. Anthony Barone, he is signed through 2028. Logan Watkins in Winnipeg, signed through 2026. Sioux Falls, Mike Meyer is signed through 2026, as far as I can tell. Lake Country's bringing back Kent Huckabee. Gary's bringing back Jeff Isom, which is obvious, great call. Crush it in his, half a season or so in Gary. So that's a good sort of keeping that turnaround going. Presumably Chris Coast will be back in Fargo, though he's hard to anticipate because he's not a guy. I like that about him. Backup catchers are weird people. Steve Montgomery's returning to Sioux City. Joe Calfapietra back in Kansas City. Brett Jody is signed through 2026 with Lincoln. So that leaves the one question mark there, which is the Chicago Dogs job. Matt Passarella is not coming back for that gig. We'll discuss that. Put that on hold for now. Pin in that. Put it on the board. Yes. Moving right along, let's go Frontier League, because I think that is probably the most reasonable one to discuss from this point. And we will start, again, just from the angle of this is probably the simplest one to look at, because there's no changes in the Frontier League? Yeah, wow. Okay. No, we got one. Two? I lied. There's more than one. We'll start with the easy stuff. Tom Vaith, he signed through 2027. With Washington. Jamie Bennett with Schaumburg signed through 2028. And a lot of these guys also have deals that we just don't know the details of. It's not been announced, but it seems like, they might have multi-year deals, but all we know is that they're returning. So on that topic, Jared Lemieux returning to Lake Erie. I think he's through 2026, but he might have an extension already. We got Andy McCauley coming back to Evansville. Mike Pinto, who it seemed a little iffy whether he was coming back to Joliet, was announced to be returning to Joliet. Pat Scalabrini obviously will be in Quebec. Greg Taggart got extended to stay in Tri-City, continuing to eat crow on that one. Bobby Brown returns to Ottawa. TJ Stanton returning to New York. Presumably Jonathan Abaladejo is coming back to Trois-Rivières. I think they're both happy with that deal for now. Jared Edmondson was announced to be returning to Brockton after a good improvement last year. Chris Widger, he is presumably returning to Sussex. Jay Pesci and Brett Wellman, presumably coming back to their expansion markets of the Mississippi and Down East, respectively. So what does that leave us with here? That leaves us with Steve Brook and Gateway. Again, he's presumably returning. I just skipped him in the initial look over here. That gives us three options here. So Burke Gonzalez, we knew from the end of last season, the chaos happened in New Jersey. He was done. He was, I guess, let go with like a week or whatever, 2 weeks left in the season. I forget. But he is not returning. Bobby Jones, however, is returning to New Jersey. That should be interesting. Keep an eye on that one. A lot of big feelings from people in there. Bobby, I'm not going to say he's hard to get along with. I don't know him personally, but it just sounds like he's one of those guys that you find a lot of in indie ball, where it's if you love him, you love him. If you clash with him, you clash with him. We'll see. Got new ownership over there in New Jersey. Maybe that works. Maybe that doesn't work. Maybe they don't know what they're getting into. Maybe they know exactly what they're getting into, and he's happy to have new ownership there. So we shall see. So Bobby Jones in New Jersey once again, though in the new digs in whatever the town, Patterson. Toby Hall, not returning to Windy City, but he is heading to Florence, sort of switching between teams that the ownership group has. That's fine. He dealt with a lot in Windy City last year. Obviously, the tragic passing of Bobby Jenks and having to sort of cover that in his first big managing gig. Let's get a fresh start on that one. That was a struggle. I think he does have a lot of good potential. I think he made the most of last year. I heard good things. Let's go with give him a shot in Florence. It's a good, healthy market, and we'll go from there. With that, though, Chad Rhodes not returning to Florence, and that sucks. I'm a big Chad Rhodes guy. I think Indy Ball's better with Chad Rhodes in it. I talked about that a little bit on Indy Ball Pod. Again, a third plug. Look at that, Nick. I'm doing my job out here. I think Chad's, to give the brief, I think Chad's fantastic. If you are aware of the content they did with him and his sort of vibe, he's down for the team. He's fun. He's a good marketing play. But also, I think he's good with the guys, and he is sort of a unique guy that really only seems to fit in Indy Ball, at least as is, unless he's going to really change the way he kind of interacts with the world, perhaps. And I think that's valuable, and I think we need those people. And I think there were some blatant issues with the way things were done there. I think he probably didn't have the support he needed for one reason or another. This is not me with inside information. It's just me as a fan of Chad Rhodes and closely watching what he did. I think if you're going to be a former pitching coach, you can't have a bad pitching staff. And I know the Florence is pitcher friendly, or is batter friendly in that ballpark, but it doesn't excuse the numbers that are being put up by that pitching staff. I think he fell into the trap as a young manager with familiarity that he held on to the wrong guys for too long. I understand that a lot of guys don't necessarily want to go pitch in Florence, so it's easier said than done. But I think having a little more support, maybe from an operations standpoint, would have helped. And some of his in-game decision-making, I described it on Indy Ball Pod this way. He had this weird thing going on where when there was a situation to be unconventional, I'll say it this way. When there's a situation to be conventional, do the easy, normal decision-making thing within the game, it felt like a lot of the time he went unconventional with mixed results, but that's okay because that's Chad Rhodes. That's what you signed up for unconventional. That's okay. But then there were a lot of times when, especially from like an analytics perspective, which is where I sit from a lot, there was a situation where I'm like, don't do the conventional thing here. That's not your move at all. And he would do the conventional thing. And I feel like a little more support there would have gone a long way for a guy in his first managing role. So that sucks. I hope to see Chad land somewhere else. We'll talk about maybe what's going on there in a little bit. But with the Windy City opening, we're going Tom Carcione. I never know what to do with the extra vowel. I'm sorry, my Italian friends. It's who I am. I'll get better with it, Tom. To be fair, I love Chad Rhodes. And last year during Manager Madness, I misspelled his name. Tough scene. So everyone's getting it. But he is going to go to Windy City to replace Toby Hall. And again, Toby Hall will go to Florence to replace Chad Rhodes. Musical chairs, as I said. Let's go to the Pioneer League. And you might be thinking the Atlantic League seems pretty straightforward. Well, we'll see, because we still have another opening sitting out there. Okay, so if the Frontier League was a warm-up to the chaos, now let's really step into it a little bit with the Pioneer League here. We'll start casually. Michael Schlatt signed through 2030 in Missoula, so he's back. Aaron Miles, presumably returning to Oakland. There's been no big announcement, but he won a championship, and he's been doing media over there and been making roster moves, so presumably Aaron Miles is back. We have Cash Beauchamp, presumably returning to Boise. Todd Pratt, presumably returning to Glacier. Craig Maddox, returning to Billings. I would say Evan Parker, presumably back in Ogden. Then we have Sean Repay confirmed as coming back to Great Falls. And that is all we know. And throw a wrench in it, Cash Beauchamp has not been announced in Boise, and I kind of wonder if Cash is coming back as the manager of that team. So we have 6 guys up in the air just off of that. We have Dimitri Young, who managed Colorado Springs, who is no longer around, also known as NOCO. Billy Horton, who is not returning to Yuba Sutter. Cash Beauchamp, question mark with Boise. Les Lancaster, no longer with Rocky Mountain because Rocky Mountain's no longer with the league. Troy Percival, who is already announced to be leaving Idaho Falls because he will be coming to Long Beach, so put him on the market and take him off the market. We have Frank Gonzalez, who is no longer with Grand Junction because Grand Junction, again, no longer with the league. If it's a Colorado team, they're gone. So where does this all start falling into place? Well, there is one more new team, Modesto. JT Snow has already been announced there, so let's not worry about that. There is a 12th team. And my feeling, is it rumors? Is it feelings? Is it both? Is that Dimitri Young will be managing that 12th team. He already did a little bit of travel ball with NOCO. He seems down for it. Hopefully it's not as bad of a mess if they're doing travel again, so maybe it's not that bad. Maybe some time in California, then take the team to Montana for some time there, and then take them to Idaho or whatever. I don't know. I think it's a bad idea, but they're in a situation, so whatever. Dimitri Young is what I'm potentially hearing, so chalk that in. Now, what does that leave us with? Again, Cash, who's a question mark with Boise. Don't know what they would do if they don't have him back. Billy Horton, who is no longer with Yuba Sutter. Les Lancaster, who is leaving for Idaho Falls, so that will fill in the Troy Percival gap that he leaves going to Long Beach. Frank Gonzalez, who is rumored to be going to Yuba Sutter. So look for that announcement. So now we have Billy Horton, who is sort of left floating because Dimitri, Cash, Les Lancaster, and Frank Gonzalez are all kind of out and about. Because Les Lancaster said is in Idaho Falls. I did hit that. Okay. So remaining spots that are open with that one. Putting this puzzle together here. Potentially Boise. That's about it. And Team 12 potentially. There's your Pioneer League. What a mess. And we have one guy left out on the musical chairs there apparently. Which is what happens. I mean, because you have 12 teams from last year. 11 managers return to a team within the league. And then JT Snow comes in as the 12th, which means someone is going to be left holding the bag. And unfortunately right now it's Billy Horton. Keeping that in mind moving forward. Last league, didn't mean to go this long on this. Let's look at the Atlantic League. Ones we know. Rick Forney signed through 2028. Lou Ford announced to be returning. Ross Peoples, can't see him leaving. Let's see. Goose Gazzo returning to Gastonia. Jamie Keefe returning to High Point. PJ Phillips rumored to be returning to Charleston. Paul Fletcher returning to Lexington rather. So that leaves us with 3 question marks here, which is Staten Island and Hagerstown. They are already tied together because Mark Minikasi is jumping from Staten Island to Hagerstown. So Staten Island is off the board, or Hagerstown's off the board, but Staten Island is not. So Staten Island is looking for somebody. Additionally, there's been no announcement about Stan Clyburn. I bring your attention back to the first league we discussed and the one opening on the board there, which is Chicago. Stan's brother's there. It's been rumored for months that he could be making that move. I don't know. There's a bit of rumbling within the league that potentially that's the move happening within the Atlantic League, not in the American Association. They haven't said much to me about it, but keep an eye out for that potential move. If not, things simplify. The only thing we're looking to fill then is Staten Island and Chicago. Staten Island, you got to look at then the Chicago opening. Matt Passarella's a New York guy. Wouldn't surprise me if he comes in there. Keep an eye there at that point. So what do we have? Either we have Staten Island and Chicago open. I guess those are really just going to be your openings. That's basically it. So let's look at who's around because, again, I haven't heard anything about Matt Passerella. It just seems like the common sense fit for Staten Island, but I don't know. Southern Maryland, again, it depends on what Stan does. Chicago could be open. Southern Maryland could be open. That's I guess, the 2 openings here. We've landed that plane. So to look, though, at the market, because what is there? What, potentially 2 jobs open? And there are, by my count, common sense 9 sort of run-of-the-mill, call it A, B, maybe C tier hires, and then you're looking at new names that we don't know much about. Other than that, in which case it's hard to have much conjecture about it. But just in no particular order, we got Bert Gonzalez, who's no longer in New Jersey. Billy Horton has won a championship, has had some good runs in the Pioneer League, no longer in Yuba. Chad Rhodes struggled in Florence, but he's a potentially fun pick. Lamar Rogers really had a tragic time in Gary, which he's going to have a hard time because the way Jeff Isom got that team playing afterwards, that's tough. It's hard to be like, it's Gary when the next guy comes in and gets success. Mark Mason, who's no longer in Hagerstown, and also Shane Turner, no longer in Hagerstown. Not sure if either of them are looking for a role right now, but they're presumably out there. Matt Passarella, as I said, no longer in Chicago. Billy Horn is not on the coaching staff in Long Island this year. He has managing experience. I'd be interested to see if anyone makes the move for him. And my conspiracy theory on Staten Island is that maybe Wally Backman could be a player here. That is not a player, but you know what I mean. A player is a manager. You got it. I think it's an interesting option. I don't like it. Oh, I don't like it. I think it's not a good idea, but I wouldn't put it past them. I'm also not sure they want to have the Wally Backman experience. But all I'm saying is Wally Backman, who is rarely on social media, randomly also happened to be on Twitter the day that the job opening was announced. So you never can tell. There's that on that. Let's take 5 and let's discuss this Canadian League here. Canadian Baseball League, formerly the Intercounty Baseball League, has been in operation since 1919. They just announced they're going full professional. They're doing Indy ball, okay? Their sort of resume bolster straight out of the press release here is last season they had 64 players with either MLB or minor league experience suited up to play in the league. It's a 9-team league. There's a lot of enthusiasm here, and I'm going to caution people a bit. I don't want to be negative. I'm saying they have quite the road ahead of them. 64 players with affiliate experience or MLB experience is impressive until you realize a 9-team league has about 225 players. So that gives you, running the quick math, 28% of them have played affiliated ball before. Guys, I mean, it's 100% in the Atlantic League. I mean, obviously it's more of a Pioneer League comp, but it's just, I see what they're getting at. Okay. Fan interest is apparently high. The good things. Fan interest seems high. They have a good, stable base of teams, it appears. They have 9 in the league. Weird number. We'll deal with that later. People seem passionate about it. Canadians are super into it. The Labatt Park in London is apparently like the oldest continuously operating baseball field in the world. How about it? When it comes to concerns, I would say the ballpark arrangements throughout this league might make it tough to turn a big profit. And I would say the amount of money needing to be spent to run a full Indy professional league team versus what they were doing before, which is like college summer amalgamation of things, it's a vast difference. So I think the financial undertaking is going to be a lot. I assume they wouldn't make the jump blind. I'm sure they are aware of that. But the other side of it is when it's brought up, could this league threaten other leagues or take Canadian teams away from other leagues? I wouldn't say so. And there's a couple of reasons. One, the player market is already very saturated. It's going to be tough to make a good competitive league out of this in a professional level because we have talked a lot lately on Indie Ball Report about how saturated the player market is. There's a lot of not saturated with teams the player market is, and how it's getting thin within the player market. There we go. And that a lot of that comes back to the fact that there's a lot of teams, Pioneer League's growing, Frontier League's growing. Also, affiliated ball is still the number one option, but Banana Ball now is expanding. They're taking like 200 something players off the board. Crazy to think about. There's just a lot of other options. The economy is tough. Some people are just trying to get in the job market. Everyone's selling real estate. So it's really tough to lock in a full roster of competitive players. They might be helped or hurt. I can't quite tell by the immigration policies these days, where it's getting a little tougher to move guys back and forth into Canada and out. Maybe that helps them lock down the Canadian player market. Maybe that hurts them when it comes to reaching American players. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. We got to just watch that one. I just think there's a very limited. It's going to be tough to get a competitive player base. Now, if the Pioneer League continues to do weird stuff and struggle, maybe an option because I think they're going to be closer in competition. Though, if I were to grade out this league's talent level, I did a deep dive into it just to compare them. In their top 40 players I ran projections on, only about 2 of them I would say would be the average Frontier League player. That's tough. So there's a lot working against it. Obviously, they're going to be looking for a different type of player if they're going professional, I would assume. But without getting too deep into it, I think it's going to be difficult. They had 250,000 fans last year. They played 42 games per team. I think it's going to be tough to turn a big profit. It's 48 games. That's not a big draw. Guys want to play a lot of ball. They're playing half the length of the shortest season, which is 96 games in the Pioneer. And I just don't necessarily see that. I don't think this is fitting into a niche within this. I think the Pecos League fills the gap between college and low-level college and guys who aren't playing college to the Pioneer League. I think the Pioneer League covers the wide gap between Pecos and the new lack of affiliated ball up to the Frontier League. I don't know where the Canadian Baseball League fills. Now, I could be missing it, but that's all I would say. I would caution people. I do think there's an opportunity here if they go really aggressive into the player development way, where they're like, come up to Canada, really develop. You're not going to have to play as many games. You can spend some time developing. If they were investing in Etritronic cameras, Traject systems, Rapsodo, all that, getting good development and training guys up there, then maybe that sets them apart and creates an environment where people want to be. But I don't know how many guys are going to pull from even the leagues like the USPBL or anything like that. So that's my short version on that one. I know I said something similar on socials and the Canadians were mad, but that's that today. This was unstructured. We'll see how this goes in the future. I kind of like the coffee vibe. Spilled a little bit of it. That's fine. Let's see if I can edit this and post it in time. I got to leave for work. It's a mess. But on brand, Indy Ball Nation. We're back. Back? Question mark? Keep an eye out for some awards. No time, like the way too late.